In this video, we will concentrate on the anatomy of the turtle. Now, the turtle has a modification for life with a suit of armor. And as we look at the turtle, most preserved turtle specimens will be red-eared sliders. This specimen is going to be in the phylum Chordata, subphylum Vertebrata, class Reptilia. And so we will begin with studying the external anatomy of the turtle. With regard to the external anatomy of the turtle, we can see the fore and the hind limbs. They have 5 toes with claws on each end. You'll also note the webbing between each of the toes, and this provides a stronger stroke during swimming. The top of the shell is the carapace, the bottom of the shell is the plastun. The horny domed coverings over the carapace are going to be the scutes. Additionally, we'll see that neck and head with the eyes do have a nicetating membrane over them. We'll see the beak, lacking teeth but does have a very strong beak. Right back behind the eyes will be the tympanum, or the external opening for the ears. The tail would be back behind. And so let's have a labeled diagram to help you with the external structures. Here we have the carapace, the plastun, the bridge. We have the tail that's not visible. We can see the various type of scutes that are present. Remember that the eye has that nicetating membrane. We have the beak that's tooth-like. The mouth does not have any teeth, but it does have a tongue. Right back in the back we would have the tympanum, which is the opening of the ear. The skin is scale-like, and you will notice these long toenails. The skeletal system of the turtle is unique among the vertebrates by possessing both an external skeleton and an internal skeleton. With regard to the external skeleton, when we look at the shell, the top of the shell is called the carapace, the bottom of the shell is called the plastun, and the junction that connects the carapace and the plastun is called the bridge. There are 49 bones that comprise the carapace of the turtle, and they are grouped into 6 bone groupings. Right here we have the nuchal bone. Going down the center we have the neural bone. Out along the sides right there and here we have the costals. Running along the sides we have the peripheral. Moving back to the outer back right here we have the suprapygal, and then right down towards the base is the pygal bone. There are 13 bones of the plastun, and they are organized into 7 groups. Right here we can see the epiplastun, followed by the back area being the xiphoplaston. Moving up we have the hypoplastun. Up at the very front we have the epiplaston. So again, the top of the turtle shell is called the carapace. The horny shields that cover the shell are called the scutes. And the bottom of the shell is called the plastun. The skull of the turtle is composed of 19 different bones. And if we compare our turtle skull with that of other vertebrates, we will see a similarity in the bones that are present. Right up here in the front we have the preorbital bone. Moving back towards the back we have the parietal bone. The lower jaw is the mandible. The upper jaw is the maxillae. Back in this back area we'll have the occipital bones. The roof of the mouth is called the palatine. In addition to the similarities, we will also have specialization, such as having the beak on the turtle present. Now, contrary to what cartoons would have you believe, turtles cannot remove their shell. Their exoskeleton and endoskeleton is fused together. Right here we can see the spinal cord, and so for a turtle to remove its shell, it would have to be able to remove its spinal cord. Now, with comparative anatomy, you will see that the bones are very similar to other vertebrates. The lower jaw is the mandible. We have the cervical vertebrae, the thoracic vertebrae, the sacral vertebrae. We have the scapula in that area, the humerus. We have the ulna and the radius. The phalanges are the toes. The metacarpals and tarsals are present here. We have the pubis and the ischium of the pelvic bone, the femur. We see the larger tibia, the smaller fibula, the tarsals and metatarsals, and the phalanges. In this area here, we would have the ribs. And so very much a comparative anatomy when we observe the skeletal system. And here we have the turtle skeleton labeled for you for convenience with some of the terminology I used on the previous slide. There are several techniques that can be used in determining the sex of the turtle. One of these is by examining the front claws of the turtle. The male turtles use their claws during mating rituals with the female. They also use these claws to fight and to claim and to defend their territory. Therefore, if we're looking at the front claws, the male's front claws tend to be much longer than the female's. Another form of identifying the turtle is by looking at the cloacal opening. Both the female and the male have a cloacal opening, and it is slightly different between the two different genders. In the female, the cloacal is more rounded, and it's going to be more star-shaped than it would be in the male. It's also found much closer to her body. When we look at the male's cloaca is longer and more slit-like, and it's located in the last third of the tail towards the tip. You can look at the turtle's shell or carapace to determine the sex of your turtle. It differs slightly between males and females. An adult female will have a slightly longer shell than an adult male. Now, if you're using this as a means of sexing the turtle, this method is limited because you need to make sure the turtle is fully grown. And you may assume that your turtle is a male due to a smaller size if it's still growing. One can also use the bottom shell or the plastun in sexing the turtles. A concave plastun allows for the male turtle to fit over the female's shell during mating without rolling off. And so a female's plastun will be more flattened to give her more room internally as she grows her eggs. You can also check for the tail notch. The male turtles often have this V-shaped or notch at the rear of their carapace, and this is to accommodate the tail when the turtle mates. Otherwise, the tail might be crushed against the underside of his shell. You can look for species-specific clues. Some species of turtles have gender-specific external features. The American box turtle, 90% of the time, the male box turtle have a red or orange iris, while the female has a brown or yellow one. Also, the female has a tendency to have a higher dome and more rounded shell, where the male has a lower shell and more of a oval or oblong appearance. With the sun turtle, if the turtle's underbelly has a blue coloring, it's a male. If their underbelly does not have a blue coloring, it's a female. Another way to determine the sex of a turtle is by looking at the tail length. Now, the male's tail will be longer and thicker than the female's because the male's genitalia are located within the tail. And so expect to see the female's tail being shorter and thinner. Do be aware that this is just a guideline because there is an overlap in normal size between the male and the female. And so this should not be used as a surefire way, but as a guideline to determine the sex of the turtle. And finally, the best approach to sexing the turtle is to use a combination of the suggested sexing determinations. Bear in mind that some methods are less reliable than others, but by using that combination, you will have the most success in correctly identifying the sex of your turtle. Notice that the first thing when you remove the plastun, that there will be the pectoralis muscles and a great deal of muscles that will need to be cut and removed in order to see those internal organ structures. Now, care does need to be taken when removing the plastun so that the internal anatomy of the turtle can be visible. Once it is removed, we can see the trachea. Now, with regard to the trachea, we can see the cartilage rings running down. Directly behind the trachea is the esophagus. The esophagus would lead down to the stomach. We can see that we have a 3-chambered heart. It has 2 atria, 1 ventricle. The heart is contained in the pericardial sac. Here we can see the ventral abdominal veins. These 2 large blood vessels run along each side of the ventral midline, and they're joined together by a small cross branch that we can see right here that's known as the transverse abdominal vein. We can see the right and the left aorta. and the right and the left subclavian arteries that would go out to the front legs. We can see the largest organ of the body being the liver. Here we have that J-shaped stomach. It would lead into the pyloric valve and into the intestines. Here we can see part of the small intestines. Underneath the liver we would have the gallbladder. If we had a female we would see ovaries. And in the male we would see the testes. In this view, we've moved down past the small intestines. We can see the large intestines, also known as the colon, and we can see that collapsed empty urinary bladder. Here we have the close-up of the heart, and we can see that it's clearly three-chambered, where we have our right atrium, our left atrium, and then we have the large ventricle below. Here we have opened up that lower jaw to show the Eustachian tube. That Eustachian tube is the tube that leads directly to the back of the ear, the tympanum. We can see the beak. Notice the absence of teeth. We can see the tongue located in this area, and we can see the internal nares. Finally, as we continue, again we can see the external nares here. We can see the palatine folds in this area, and then notice you'll see the glottis, and that glottis will go down into the trachea, which would then go into the bronchioles and finally into the lungs. If we follow the trachea down, the trachea will branch. When it branches into the bronchioles, and each of those bronchioles will enter into the right and the left lungs. Now here we have a close-up. We have that stomach right in here, and if the stomach is raised, we will see the grainy pancreas gland located within the turtle. Here, the liver has been raised, and the green bubble that is seen underneath the liver is the gallbladder. Here we have a female turtle, and we can see the very conspicuous eggs right here that are within the ovaries. Right in this area would be the urinary bladder, and we would have some accessory bladders on the side. They would eventually lead to the cloaca that would remove the waste. If the turtle is a male, then you will see the paired testes.